Satellite telemetry is stable, systems are green, confirming orbit alignment at all parameters nominal. Airlock secure, opening helmet. Engaged, approaching target satellite.
For the second sip, see if we can get a little bit of fun going on here today. And I just had the opportunity to do a little bit of research, get myself ready for today. I'm not going to read the news like I did yesterday, although I'm going to talk about some things that might be in the news a little bit, and definitely want to mention where things are at on a couple of topics that I'm going to try and do pretty consistently here. So first thing I was going to mention is just doing a little quick look. This isn't going to change from Friday to today, so it's kind of like only so much to talk about here. But one of the things that the reason that I did want to bring this up has to do with a little bit more about the topic of what I want to talk about today. And one of the things that I'm very interested in, kind of hot and heavy on, frankly, is space technologies. And over the past couple of days, we've talked about a few things. One of the things that I talked about was this the amount of stuff going on related to space technologies. So the fact that the FAA is now being floated a memo or a request to deal with 1 million satellites in orbit related to data centers in orbit. That's just absolutely staggering. Right now, if you think about it, SpaceX currently has, I think it's something like 7,000 or 8,000 satellites up there right now. Okay, those are the ones from Starlink, and that's getting going. It's going to be pretty active, pretty busy in space in the near future, just with the 10,000 satellites, right? And they're looking. They've recently introduced a way to manage 10,000 satellites, and the 10,000 satellites is going to ultimately lead to this million satellites, which is, that's not tenfold, it's 100-fold, right? It's huge, just going from 10,000 to a million. So to me, this whole next chapter, the next couple of years, it's going to be monstrous in terms of opportunity. When you think about electric cars and you think about the market share right now of electric cars with Tesla, it's going to come up probably in the next year or two that 50% of cars on the road are actually going to be Tesla, or they're going to be electric cars. Now, whether it's by a Tesla manufacturer or a traditional manufacturer, that remains to be seen. But it's one of those things where as things go on, you'll probably begin to see more and more of a foothold for that. And what that means is that we're ultimately looking at having, I'm going to say, just a super high likelihood of folks being able to, have an electric car and be part of that revolution that's coming. And good morning, everybody, again. So, and as a matter of fact, I'm kind of excited about some of the stuff I'm talking about today, so I just dove right in. But that said, why don't I start off with a second sip? For those of you who have already had a sip, if you've already maybe talked or listened in on Owen Gregorian's show and did the simultaneous sip, let's do it again and get another quick shot. And good morning, everybody, again. And so here we go. I really do think I need to have some kind of a little litany like Scott has, but I want to make it my own because I think that deserves to stay as Scott's thing, and the other folks that are doing the Scott Adams School. So, but anyways, here's a quick sip for you. And I've learned a couple quick lessons. Sip slowly. Don't sip much. Otherwise, you'll choke when you're trying to do a show. And it's the funniest thing. Every time it's like almost, okay. So today's topic was about something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and it has to do with space technologies. One of the reasons that I moved here from California after we left California is that I wanted to be close to where they're launching rockets. And, at the time, I didn't realize how many rockets were going to end up being launched from Boca Chica, Texas. So instead, and as a matter of fact, it was so funny. While I was in California, I didn't even know where Boca Chica, Texas was. I had no idea that it was the southern tip of Texas. And there was a Boca Chica in California. And I was like, I'm looking over in on the map in California, and I'm like, I'm not seeing any kind of like place where they're developing. I was looking using Google Maps, and I was like, it doesn't look like there's anything over here where they're launching rockets or blowing up rockets or anything like that. And I was like, where is this? It doesn't make sense, I mean, I can't find it. And I ended up actually up in Monterey, California at one point, and we were kind of cruising around in Carmel, which is just like a town and a half over. And I was still looking at the map, and they had a launch out of Boca Chica, and I'm up on the top of a hill in Carmel, and I'm looking south going, I should be able to see it from here. And I was like, no, it's not in California, it's in Texas. So that was a bit of okay, I need to learn my geography. But anyways, I became fascinated watching all of those launches, and that was how, when I was working for the computer security network monitoring company, I became fascinated by the technologies that were showing up behind SpaceX. And it was kind of interesting, that whole, I think I mentioned it yesterday. If you were on yesterday, you probably heard. But I was talking about detecting this brand new networking protocol. BitTorrent is a peer-to-peer networking protocol. You would remember this from Napster back in like 2000. So back in 2000, Napster was how all of the pirates were taking, they were getting pirated music, and the music industry was up in arms, and they were trying to sue everybody because people were just like taking their entire CD library, uploading it to their computer, and then sharing it to the world, and nobody had to pay for the music anymore, which, arguably is the downfall of why we don't have good music anymore. Not so much that we don't have good music, but we don't have an industry that can create good music like we did, because there's just, it's really difficult to monetize now, and the record industry kind of collapsed during the early 2000s, I think. Probably was on its way to collapse prior to that. But that technology became one of the biggest things. So when you hear people talk about Telegram and Signal, and there's a couple of others out there where there is, in some cases, a server somewhere in the cloud, somewhere in the world, that when you chat and type in messages to somebody, it relays through that server. But the reality with peer-to-peer is that if you happen to be on a bus, and you had a mobile device with you, and you popped it up and sent a message to a group, and somebody else on the bus happened to be in that group, and they had a peer-to-peer networking turned on, and it was either a Wi-Fi or a Bluetooth service on your phone that was working, the message would hop from you to that person. And then the next time that person was close to somebody else who had it, they would get it as well. And during the George Floyd riots, I was watching this whole thing happening, and I was kind of astounded. I ended up diving into a couple of platforms like trying to remember, it's like something to do with an elephant, mammoth or something like that, and then and Telegram and Signal, of course. And I was seeing on the forums in these peer-to-peer tools that they were coordinating the riots. You could see it plain as day. They were out there, doing command and control coordination, and they had people that were sharing it. And the FBI and other agencies weren't able to pick it up because it wasn't going through any kind of a central server. So the peer-to-peer stuff was like, it lit my hair on fire around 2020, because I'm thinking to myself, this is pretty nuts. It's like we've actually developed a brand new technology that's secure, encrypted. Nobody can crack it. Nobody can break it, at least nobody with the technology that was easily available then. And it's being used to coordinate riots against our law enforcement. And you couldn't tell who was behind it because there's, being peer to peer, you couldn't trace it back to some server and say, hey, this is some company that paid for that. And then you could see the shadow money and all of that. You couldn't find any of that because it was all peer to peer. Now that's still happening today. That same kind of thing happens today. I stopped looking at it because I didn't really want to become a target. And it kind of scared me off a little bit because it's, for people who are in the industry of, or in the business of tracking those people down and dealing with that kind of situation, have at it. I'm not, I'm more interested in science and technology and a little bit less interested in law enforcement as a result. But what ended up happening is because I became fascinated with this peer-to-peer technology, when I saw that the company that I worked for at the time was able to monitor that protocol, I started looking at all the different companies that actually had a significant presence with that technology. And, there's a large group of companies that were out there that had it. A lot of companies had no idea that they had these protocols running inside their company, which means, there were people probably operating inside the company using the company's resources with this encrypted peer-to-peer technology coming out of their company servers with no knowledge that it was even happening. And so, and then I saw a ton of this technology flying out of SpaceX, and I was like, okay, this is scary. Is SpaceX actually helping to foment revolution or whatever? Who knows? And I just the whole thing, being a security person, when you're in cybersecurity, you're an ultra paranoid person by nature. And, the anxiety that you live is kind of like living on a knife edge of anxiety all the time. So I didn't like that. And I wanted to kind of get away from it, which is why I ended up saying, let me get into AI technology. And I, thinking that might be a little bit better. And what has ended up happen is that instead there's a whole different anxiety related to the speed of change that's going on. It's just staggering, as you all know. But one of the things I was talking about yesterday when we talked about all of these satellites going up and the license, the FAA license that says we're going to have 1 million satellites in orbit eventually, maybe around the moon, around Earth, around the sun, different types of orbit. And they're going to, ultimately, they're going to become the network and the intelligence backbone of our space faring society in time. So, between us and the moon and us and Mars, there's probably going to be a string of satellites that'll be relay stations, real-time relay stations for communications, network communications, and compute ultimately. And even before we get to Mars, and probably before we really park ourselves on the moon with a moon base, we will probably have an extremely sophisticated network of satellites for network communications as well as server communications. So it will be almost like, at some point, I can almost envision a future where the solar system becomes sort of like malls here in the United States. You travel one city to the next in the United States and you see a strip mall that looks the same as every other city everywhere else in the United States. So I could actually picture the solar system eventually having something similar to that where humans gather, that there'll be some kind of we like our look and feel to have familiarity so that we don't feel lost and alone in the middle of nowhere. So I can just imagine that at some point we'll kind of reproduce places that we love on Earth. Maybe we won't have the blue sky and we won't have oceans and whatnot in our view, but we will have familiar sites that we'll put together in those areas, and it'll all be powered by data centers and communications that make us feel right at home here on Earth, just like we are now, minus the gravity. So I thought about that, and I was thinking, one of the things that would be interesting to talk about that, this future's coming, right? And when I was talking about going to my, I have a town hall meeting. There was a town hall meeting a couple months back, and I was going because there's a community being put in next door, and it's from where I live, and they're putting in 200 homes, 200 brand new homes. They're all going to be, I guess, like $300,000 homes, which is much more affordable than other homes that they've been putting up over the past decade, where everything is 400,000 and up. So, there's going to be some reasonable priced housing next door. That's great. But I haven't seen them do anything to make the roads nicer, because the road going by the front of that community is narrow and tight. And every time I go down it on one side, it's 2-lane road, one lane, double yellow line, and then a lane going in the opposite direction. And there's semi trucks coming up this thing all the time. And I'm driving down on the other side feeling like I practically have to run myself off the road because it's such a narrow road. And I wanted to go to the community center or to the town city meeting and say, hey, what are we doing about the roads? Because, this road currently, when we're going to have 200 homes going in and out. And by the way, this is really interesting. I just had a power outage, and hopefully the stream wasn't interrupted, but it behooves you to have a battery backup at your house. I didn't expect that to go, but I heard the thing jolt off and then back on. So kind of interesting. But yeah, no snow plows, thank goodness, to worry about on those narrow roads. But I do have, semis that take up some serious road width, and it gets scary. And then I was thinking about it. One of the things about having full self-driving and autonomous driving, I put my car into the full self-driving mode sometimes, and it pegs itself right dead in the middle of the lane, which is great. It's safe. It's predictable, which is what you want. But when you're on a road where you feel like you're going to get clipped by a semi, and then your car wants to just stay right there down the center of the road, you get really nervous, and it's like I actually always end up breaking the full self-driving and pulling a little over to the right so I feel safer, because I can't guarantee that truck is not going to take me out. So that's what I wanted to go down and tell them about at the city hall. And I did. And I was like, and by the way, just so you know, you built this road plan for this community in 2003. And that was back before full self-driving was even a glimmer in anybody's eye. And you're not even, until I see something on a plan that tells us in the community that you're going to widen the road a little bit to make it safer, I'm very nervous about where this whole adding 200 people to this road, 200 homes on this road is going to take us. So, it was a nervous thing, right? A little bit concerning. So, Now take that forward. The other thing is you're looking at plans that were made in 2003 that are not reflecting a reality that exists today in 2025, 2026. And then you're also looking at a rollout of a robotaxi fleet that is probably going to be in the millions of cars per year hitting our roads. Now, perfect world, we all would have been able to see the future back when they planned that road in 2003, and we would have seen Tesla come up. We would have all bought Tesla shares at 93 cents a share and probably all be millionaires today, right? All of us. But that didn't happen for most of us, and certainly not for me. But it behooves us to kind of do what Scott always suggested, and Scott Adams always talked about looking to the future a little bit and trying to see around the corner. And that's sort of what I'm looking at right here. And that's what I'd like to share with today's conversation is now that we know that the FAA has a million, they're petitioning for a 1 million satellite license. Every technology behind getting those satellites in orbit is something that we need to be thinking about because those are investment opportunities, once in a lifetime investment opportunities that you want to think about. Now, do not hear what I'm saying as advice to go out and just start buying stocks in this stuff. I'm not somebody who is an investment person. I'm not the smartest person for investing. I don't have a license for it. It's not my strength. But you can do the investigation and research and talk to your financial advisor and decide if it's right for you down the line. But I thought I'd at least bring out the names of some of the companies that are out there. And, that's Rocket Labs as an example, Boeing, Lockheed Martin. I didn't put it in here because I talk about it so much. SpaceX, it's very obvious. In the near future, as I understand it, if you own Tesla shares, you may get a chunk of SpaceX by proxy or through the proxy, through the investment of your SpaceX stocks. Through your Tesla stocks. So what's going to happen when you have when you go from 0 satellites in orbit for data centers to 1 million satellites in orbit? And obviously they're not going to happen overnight. But when you look at what the super heavy rocket system can launch, I think they're talking about like 50. Let's just see here what I'm going to see what it says. How many version 3 Starlink and how many times I've spelt satellite wrong in the past couple of days. I always try and put 2 T's in there. But yeah, we'll skip trying to fix that. Version 3 Starlink satellites in the Super Heavy. So the reason this is a big deal is they can't put a single version 3 satellite in the Falcon 9. And I don't think they can put any in the Falcon Heavy. It's just the payload is too big. So the version 3 satellites, it looks like they're going to be able to put 60 at a time for every launch. Now, Elon's plan, he has factories going up here in Florida. He's got factories in Boca Chica, Texas. And they're talking about 1 Super Heavy per hour going up 24 hours a day, starting sometime in the next 2 to 3 years. 60 times 24, right? Let's just do some back of the napkin math with a calculator here. So 60 times 24, that's 1,400 satellites a day. And if you do that times 2, because there's 2 launch facilities with Florida and Boca Chica, and then you do that times, let's just say 300 days, because maybe they're not going to get them up every single day. That's 100,000, or it's almost 1 million satellites. And they could potentially, this is crazy, they could potentially have 1 million satellites in orbit within a year of getting that launch cadence, which means you talk about acceleration in growth. They're going to now have, Tesla's starting to spin up fabs for chips. So they're going to make chips that are going to go in these data centers. They are now also currently they made this in the Tesla investment news just last week. They said they're building the fab. They're building a new solar panel factory, solar cell factory. That's going to be used to put the solar cells on these satellites. They have the 2 factories already built at SpaceX in order to build hundreds of maybe even thousands of rockets per year, so that they can have a launch cadence of 1 rocket every minute or every hour from the 2 different launch facilities. And ultimately, they're going to end up with another launch facility out in Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. I don't know if they'll go that far, but I think they plan to. So now you're going to have potentially 2 to 3 launch facilities putting up potentially 1 million satellites by 2030. So everybody thinks that the investment horizon for Tesla was just a few years ago and it's all too late now. Now look at this. Every single technology that is out there, that if you could invest $100 in every single one of these companies, and just park it and forget about it. I don't know. Again, don't take this as investment advice from me. I'm just saying I see this gigantic opportunity. Whether it's, assuming that we still have a stock market and a currency and all of that stuff in the 2030s and forward, then this is going to become a sector that we now have a foreseeable future where all of these technologies are going to be in hyper demand. We're going to need rockets. We're going to need all of the different deployment systems. So rockets doesn't just mean, all of these companies are not just about putting the rockets up. That's, SpaceX will probably lead that. Rocket Lab will be right there with them. There are other launch organizations that'll be right there with them. You've got Blue Origin, and they're going to start ramping up, especially when the money starts flowing. And then you also have to have folks that are going to deal with the systems that are going to be hardened and ready for orbital insertion. You're going to need launch integration, companies that are going to manage the satellite business, the buses, all of the different parts that are going to be flying. There's going to be a massive, massive parts industry for all of those parts that are going up there. Those data centers aren't just going to be one company. They're not going to just be one type. There's going to be all kinds of satellites going up there. There's going to be communications, payload coordination, space systems, frequencies that people are going to want to buy, bandwidth for the networks. Power generation, we know, solar storage and energy. Rocket Lab will probably, they're also looking at building some solar panel production for satellites. Northrop Grumman, this is a company that my dad used to work for. All of these companies are going to start building out some amazing technologies to support this massive push to put 1 million satellites in orbit. And then you'll have companies like Honeywell doing thermal management systems, environmental controls, radiation hardened components for space. And then when you get out there, you're going to have the chips, right? You got to have the chips inside the data centers that are going to be in this million satellite swarm. So companies like Microchip Technology, they're going to be doing things that are good for radiation hardening. And they're going to also, a lot of this is also going to be about low power chips that are going to be, a big deal. BAE systems, right? These guys, again, radiation hardened processors, computers. NVIDIA, of course, will be in that. So will AMD. And Hewlett Packard. It's like, when I was first starting out in computers, Hewlett Packard made one of the best PCs on the market that you could buy at the time. And they were eclipsed by a bunch of others, Gateway, Dell, and all of these other companies that came out. that took over the market. And even today, now everything is different. We've got, for a while there, we had Sony playing in the computer space, but then that disappeared. And now we have Asus and what do you call it? Lenovo and Apple, of course, and Microsoft has some of their own hardware nowadays. The day that the IBM PC comes back, I'll be thrilled. It'll be fun. One of my very first computers was actually an IBM PC back in the day. So all of these companies are going to be places where you could potentially put some investment or go into business or look for jobs at these kind of companies. I mean, the opportunity right now, today, this week, this month, if you're in construction, going out and supporting any one of these data centers that they're trying to build that are ground-based data centers, for the next 5 years, 3 to 5 years, that's still going to be huge because the build out to support AI, the way it's going, is going to have to be massive. So we're going to do it on the ground. But one of the cool things about moving out into space is that if we didn't move out into space, reuse of water would suddenly become a big deal. And, for the uninformed, I would say uninformed, my personal opinion, they'll say that we'll have water wars because of that. The fact of the matter is, I don't think we'll ever have to have water wars because, first off, if you're using water cooling for chips, it's not like you flush water in and then flush it out into the water table. You recycle it. You keep using it. You cool it. You heat it. You cool it. You heat it. And ultimately, the water probably becomes more and more pure every time it goes through the system, because the heating is going to drop out minerals and elements that you don't necessarily want or need in the water as it heats up and becomes steam and then gets reprocessed. So the concern for, ultimately, I think a data center could become a desalination plant for fresh water as needed for a community. So I don't think we're going to have water wars here on Earth as much as, short-sighted people will say, for fear and terror of your heart, worry about this thing. But I don't think that's going to be a problem. But still, having it out in space makes a big deal. It is a big deal. So, when you look at the stuff that's going on, it's just absolutely exciting, staggering, mind-blowing to know that all of these companies are out there doing things today. And if you're able to go and invest in these companies at some point, or put some kind of, go learn some skills so that you could work for one of these companies, or just find a way to support what they're doing, you're investing in our future, a future that I think all of us are going to look at and say, this is pretty exciting. And it leads ultimately to other companies and other industries. And let's see, and give them without any sound, give them some video play here. But yeah, I mean, everything is going to be point-to-point laser communications with all kinds of new network protocols that are going to be developed to support this massive infrastructure of data centers and massive infrastructure of sensors, telemetry, payloads being delivered. It's mind-blowing to think of all of the things that we have just on a horizon. And I am so looking forward to seeing this thing launch, the new one. Hopefully it'll launch here in the next couple of days. I'm not sure when it's going to go up, but as soon as I have a date, I'll make sure I point that out. It's not today, clearly. It's still too cold. They're still standing down from their other, from previous attempt. But all of these companies are going in the direction, they're literally going to where the puck is headed, as opposed to waiting. They're not on the gee, I wonder what's going to come next. This is us all looking around the corner at our future and all of the futures that are coming when it comes to all of the different technologies that are going to be out there. So at some point, I'm going to create a version of this heat map that you see here, where it's focused on space. And as a matter of fact, let's see if I can refine it and see what we get. No, I didn't think so. I have a feeling in order for this to be projected as a heat map, I'll have to jump through a few hoops to get it set up. But, it'll be something where I will probably start popping up the heat map like this, instead of with random what's in the S&P 500, but moreover, what are all of the space technologies and what are all of the infrastructure technologies that are going up today that are, heading in a direction towards this kind of bright, exciting, and kind of crazy future. So, it definitely is something, without a doubt, to just be understood, to know it's out there. And then, there are going to be folks that I would consider, if you're looking for somebody who can give you advice on this stuff, real, actual investment advice, you've got companies that run these funds, the EFTs. ARC, for example, they have a whole division focused on space exploration and innovation. And you can go check them out and read their prospectuses in order to learn about what to invest in. So, not everybody has money to invest a lot in any of these things. But if you have a job and you have a 401k, one of the things that I like to point out, most people don't think about, I'm not sure if people think about, but one of the things that I think about is that when you work for a company and you have a tax-deferred 401k, depending on how much you contribute and how much money you have, the thing to know about that tax-deferred 401k is that it lowers your income by the amount you contribute. So when you look at how much your salary is and how much your income is, if your salary puts you right on the edge of a tax bracket where if you make a certain number and it's like 18% or 16%, and then when you go over that number, it goes up to like 22%, right? So if that's the kind of scenario you're in, you could be really close to that line where you end up tipping over, just accidentally tipping into that 22%. The way you can keep yourself back in the lower tax threshold is to invest in your 401k, because it'll reduce your taxable income by the amount that you put into the 401k. And that works out to being a net zero change in your paycheck. So if you had, let's say you put $10,000 a year into your 401k, and that $10,000 reduced your taxes enough to bring you down under a specific threshold that you no longer had to pay the higher tax bracket, the amount that you save is equivalent, how much they take out of your paycheck is equivalent to the amount they would have taxed you in the higher tax bracket. So it means it's literally an incentive for you to say, I should be dumping as much money as I possibly can into my 401k, which I think at the moment you can dump as much as $30,000 to $36,000 a year of your income into that into those investments. Now, whether you put it in a 401k, you can't invest in one-off stocks, so you have to pick a fund. But you typically can find funds that have, like ARC. I don't know if ARC is available in most 401ks. A lot of cases that it's not. But it's good to know, you can investigate what funds are available in your investment portfolio, and you can actually go see which ones might actually have exposure. Anytime they have any of those stocks that we just talked about in the fund that you're going into, you can set aside a ton of money and actually put them into funds that are likely to grow exponentially when that satellite swarm starts to hit. It's going to start having an impact on the world's gross domestic product. It's going to exponentially grow all of the possible transactions that happen. And because the transactions happen, um, you know, today, the amount of money that all employees who work actually make, and in the amount paid to you as an employee, when you add all of that up, the gross domestic product is actually the incomes that we make are a fraction of the overall gross domestic product. And that's because the companies themselves have these business to business transactions that are huge dollar wise, and because they're so huge, it altogether it kind of dwarfs what people get paid in salary. We feed the GDP by buying things in our countries and whatnot, but the idea that you are able to actively feed the GDP with your income, when you start seeing the spending and the transaction for the scale of what's coming, it's going to blow away individual incomes. It's going to like 10x individual incomes. And the reason that that's significant is when they talk about an abundance future, everybody's like, how is that possible? If you don't pay me a paycheck, how am I going to be able to buy anything? And if I can't buy anything, how does the GDP of a country grow? Well, it's not just the amount that the companies that are happening around us, the amount that those companies are transacting is so high above what we spend as consumers. We spend like 30% of the GDP. So 60% of that comes from non-spending transactions, not consumer spending, which means that, and I'm not an economist like Scott was, and I don't know the economy like he did, nor do I know it like a lot of other financial people talking out there. But what I'm seeing is that the transactions that exist out there are going to be so much bigger and higher than what our individual consumerism actually puts into the economy, that it will take off around us. And because of that, it is possible for us to have a what do you call that? The basic, the income, the universal basic income. So it will be possible for people to stop working and not work, at least not as like slave wages or wage slaves, as they call us, when we work just because we need to have enough money to pay our bills and function and survive. It will be possible for a universal basic income to cover the bets for every citizen of our country, every non-citizen technically, every citizen of the world. Ultimately, these things could actually grow big enough that we could pay every single person in the world a universal basic income to survive. And then Elon keeps talking about a universal high income. And I think when you start seeing the scaling of 1 million satellites, I mean, think about this. When you end up with a colony on the moon, a colony on Mars, space colonies on satellites like Eros and Ceres, and maybe even colonies on other moons like Europa and the ones over Titan over and around Saturn. And they all end up with their own economies. And they have things that they can trade in our solar system. And we become a spacefaring industry with multiple colonies all over the solar system. The economy scale will be so big that we will actually, our concerns of what's going on here on Earth will be a fraction of everything else. Now, I will still bet that the bulk of humanity will exist on Earth, and that the economy will be largest on Earth for some time to come. But I do think that down the line, you'll see massive economies that are outside of Earth, outside of the economies that we know today, and our country economies that we talk about. What could become the moon base ultimately could house tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. A small city now, small countries now, actually have populations in that range. And Mars is a planet not quite as big as Earth. Colonization of Mars is going to be difficult because it's not, you don't have atmosphere, you don't have, there's so many of the things we take for granted here are going to have to be manufactured there. So it's going to go a little slower, but you also have autonomous robots that can be sent, programmed to build the communities before we even get there and to build the structures. When you look at the scale of the planning and the ideas, so today that, or I don't know if you know, but under Elon, there's this boring company, and the boring company is a tunneling infrastructure company. So they're going to create tunnels underground where cars can go. Some of those tunnels right now are being, there's a project being considered for Texas, because you've seen over the past 10 years, I guess, Texas gets flooded out with rains, and it's pretty common. It's been happening for over 100 years. I think Stevie Ray Vaughan had a song about the water reaching the height of the telephone poles, back in the 80s. So it's not like that's a new thing, but they're talking about putting tunnels that will get the water underground and out to the coast without killing hundreds of people or whatever, stranding people and destroying so much of our ground-based living. So those tunnels, those boring machines, they're going to get used on the moon, and they're going to create underground cities. You're going to have those tunnels being created on Mars, and you're going to have underground cities. And same thing on every other, I don't know. It'll probably be very difficult to do in a zero gravity environment, like on an asteroid like Ceres or Eros. But those are, very large, mile-long plus asteroids in the asteroid belt that have the potential to also house humanity. No doubt there'll be some version of proof rock going up there. And so, you've got the Cybertruck, which could make a great lunar rover, moon rover, Mars rover. You've got spaceships that, like the Dragon, that can get you capsules that can go to and from space areas. You've got the Super Heavy and the Starship, which, and this is the one thing, I haven't seen it yet, but so every time Elon talks about a colony on Mars, he ends up talking about something like Space 1999, Moon Base Alpha. And, I started to try and watch that again recently from the beginning, and it's the cheesiest, but it's cool. But it is the cheesiest sci-fi flick you've ever seen. I think you can watch it on Prime or on maybe YouTube. But the one thing out of that show that struck me immediately is that, when you look at Starship and you look at the rocket that is Starship, it's a big old cylinder, right? So you've got this rocket that's going to be out there in space, something along the lines of this or this. For those of you who are not watching, I'm just clicking on some pictures of Starship, the upper stage of the Super Heavy launch system on Google Images. Now keep that. Rather than just keeping it in your head, let's go over here, and I'm gonna do another search, and I'm gonna pull up some images of Eagle 1 Space 1999. So this is a spaceship, a science fiction spaceship that was built for this TV series. And one of the things that they have, a version of this that they have, is like this giant gantry crane. And I'm picturing this, basically these pods, and when you're looking at this, it sits on its side. and it's got a nose cone, which is where the housing of the pilots or whatever would be, and it's got a pod of engines on a back, and a fuel pod in the back, and then you've got these 4 pods that are lander legs, and they have jets on them that allow you to maneuver. And in my mind, one of the very first massive infrastructure ships that I bet gets built out in space is going to be a version of this Eagle transporter, because the first thing that it's going to do is we're going to launch these starships up into space, and then you're going to have a gantry crane version of the starship. Now let's put those two side by side so you get the picture here. Oh, there we go. All right. So we'll do that. And then we'll pick the other one for the other ship. I don't know if this is going to be, it's a pain when you're trying to do this side by side thing, because I have too many windows open, and the windows they aren't the ones that I'm trying to get. Is it, I got to click the right browser. There it is. Okay, good. And we'll put this one over here. Ah, goodness. There we go. Oh, goodness. Here we are. Trying to get this thing to land where I want it to. I hate Microsoft sometimes. I love it, but I hate it. It's like, just go where I tell you to go and do what I tell you to do. So the pictures, I was trying to get these two things lined up side by side so you could see them. But the Eagle transporter, which is this gantry crane looking, or it looks like one of those Chinook helicopters, the sky crane, the sky hook they call it, and it you could use it to like pick up a cargo ship, a container off of a cargo ship. So it's got this big open slot in the middle where you could have a crane and you could capture something. And in my mind, what this thing is going to capture, it'll be on orbit, waiting, fueled up, ready to go, and we'll put Starship up there, ready to be grabbed, and it's going to hook it, grab it, and transport it to Mars. It'll be and it doesn't have to transport it. You could let the Starship's momentum, you just have the two ships match speed and velocity and all that, and get the docking so that they connect up side by side. And once they connect up, then the moon lander, the Eagle transporter, can be used to land this Starship horizontally on the moon on a like a cement pad, as opposed to on one of these landing pads that you see in the Space 1999 image. So, and I'm just kind of zooming into, you can see they've got these landing pads around the colony of Space 1999. And they basically aren't just landing pads. They actually are elevator systems that go down into the surface of the planet so that you can get it away from the radiation. So that way you're not leaving them exposed to hard radiation over time. So anyways, I don't know why I haven't heard or seen anybody talk about that yet as the next thing, but in my mind, that's like the next technology that will some company, it's going to be one of these companies that I was just talking about. One of these guys that, like Lockheed, Boeing, instead of fussing about doing a tiny little capsule, which is what they're worried about right now, they need to be thinking ahead and saying, no, we're going to have we're going to create the Eagle lander for you so that you can land the Starship. You don't have to worry. The biggest fear of landing Starship on the moon right now is you land it vertically and the doggone thing tips over. It just falls flat on its side. And then as a result, who knows how much damage? Does it blow up? Who knows? It's low gravity, so maybe it'll bounce. Who knows? It's not a Bumble. Those of you who catch that reference. But we need it to be able to land safely on the moon. Now, of course, we'll probably need to have some landing pads created. We're going to need to have something to plow the dirt. And obviously, that's where the robotics are going to come in. And so I can actually literally see, for those of you who are experiencing snow today, I can see a Tesla Cybertruck with a big old snowplow on the front of it, plowing dirt on the moon, getting it down to hard tack so that they actually have a landing zone for this thing in the future. The landing zone for the ship, whether it lands vertically or for one of these Eagle Lander style horizontal landing devices. Whatever it is, it just seems like it's a natural evolution. And all I can say is if you think back, this was Space 1999 came out in like 1970. We had people in 1960s to 1970s thinking this stuff through that far ahead. The brilliance, the intelligence, ingenuity, and creativity of the people that did that. And, you know, we talk about the boomers, right? The boomers are those are the parents of the boomers. Those are the greatest generation, I think, is what they called them. They were the people who figured out World War I and World War II, figured out how to take a pre-war economy, convert it into a war economy where basically all of our automotive plants became manufacturing for tanks. And, you know, some of the tanks that they built were just ridiculous. They weren't really made for prime time. They really weren't the kind of tanks that you would want to, you wouldn't, they weren't going to survive a big battle. But then they made so many of them, it didn't matter if they all survived the big battle. And that's what we're doing now. We're going to mass produce rockets. We're going to mass produce solar technologies. And we already have with Proof Rock, we've technically got the technology to mass produce the tunneling technologies that are going to create a moon base and a Mars base. We have the Cybertruck, which you may call it ugly, fine, who cares? But you put a slightly different build on that thing, and you have a mass-produced Land Rover, Moon Rover, and Mars Rover that needs minimal change to be functional on those planets outside of the Earth. And so to know that we have a visionary that is able to see the kind of vision that our forebears, if you want to call it that, were thinking back in the late 60s, early 60s, late 60s, 70s. So we human beings never lost our ingenuity. This is a really good and inspiring and wonderful thing to think about. Not only did we not lose, we have a couple, like Werner von Braun, who was the guy behind the V-2 rocket that the Nazis were using to blast the UK. He got out of that. He didn't want to be a Nazi collaborator and become the guy who bombed Europe. So he defected, was able to escape, and became the inspiration behind the rocket you're looking at right now. This, the one that I have on screen, which is the Artemis 2. That's the Artemis 1, but it never left, right? All of our inspiration, all of the ingenuity, the smarts, the capability of being able to build this stuff, we have it. It's still here. And we've got hundreds of engineers, thousands of engineers that work at Tesla, Proof Rock, SpaceX, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, L3 Harris, all of these companies, they are the home to the smartest people that we have as human beings. And they are going to be leading the charge, giving us hope for the next generation, for the next 10 generations potentially. And, all of the concerns that we have about, we've got to take care of feeding our people on Earth, and we should divert all of the money that we spend on this space technology so that we can take care of stuff on Earth. All of the technologies that they built starting back in the 50s to now have lifted more than 30% of the world out of poverty. The quantity of people that remain in poverty today compared to before that generation started developing all of these technologies, it's a fraction of what it was. So, and the world as a whole has less poverty today by an order of magnitude than it had 20 years ago. So there is so much hope and so much opportunity in the future that, I hope most of what I wanted to talk about today was just to open your eyes to the future. The future that we have in front of us is incredibly hopeful. It's incredibly inspiring, and it's incredibly it's hugely possible for you to maybe pepper a couple dollars here and there where you can around all of these companies. Buy a couple shares. I mean, some of these might be really expensive to buy, but buy a share. Find a way to make a couple bucks and throw some money at some of these companies. Not all of them are going to pay out. Some of them are going to go bankrupt. Some of them are going to not exist in 10 years. It's a gamble. If you really want to understand what's going on behind these companies, you need to do some deep research. Go look at especially when they're public companies. You can go out and look at their investor relations. You can read up about them, follow their earnings, and you can see like this company has a $600 plus share price. Well, if they suddenly 10x their revenues because they're part of this massive future economy that's going to be dramatically bigger than it is today, that could 10x. That $600 could become $6,000. We don't know. I mean, there's no guarantee. This is all speculation, and you shouldn't take anything I'm saying as advice, but you should look at it. You should be aware of it if you have any interest in the future. And this is only space. Forget about the fact that we have the AI technology corridor that's got so much going on, so much opportunity, and then biotech. With all of the different things that are out there to understand and learn about biotech, life extension, we could live a very long time into the future in a very hopeful future, filled with opportunity and filled with, excitement and things that we can't even imagine today, right? Most of us can't imagine. When we were kids growing up, little kids, all of you, I don't care how old you are today, could you imagine where we are today? I couldn't. I mean, I kind of could, only because my dad was involved in some of that stuff in Lockheed Martin. Was it Lockheed? No, Grumman Aircraft. He worked for Grumman. But I worked for Lockheed for a period of time. I did their physical security out in California. But I started to open my eyes to it. I remember growing up, I had a Saturn V rocket. That thing stood about, I'm going to say this tall, right? And I'm sitting down right now, but it was like a 3-foot tall Saturn V rocket that stood on its tail, and it was all white, had black. It was exactly like you saw it in the TV commercials. And when you pinched the top, the little ship at the top would fly off, and the whole thing would come apart into 3 stages. And this is, I was, I'm going to say between 3 and 5 years old. And that was one of the toys. You couldn't even get that today because some parent would be like, oh, you're going to poke some kid's eye out with that thing. But I remember standing this thing in the corner. We were watching a moon landing, and I was over on the floor because this thing was so big. I couldn't put it on a couch or anything, and it wouldn't stand up on a couch anyway. But I had this thing up against the wall under a window, and the curtains were kind of sort of around the top of this thing. And I was shooting the launcher, the capsule up into the curtain and watching it fly out into the room because the curtain was a little bit curved at the top. And I just remember I was like watching the launch on TV, and it's like 3, 2, 1. And I was just having a great time. But that's where I got my inspiration for a lot of this space tech. My father fostered it. I'm certainly trying to do my best to foster it for my son and my grandson, and hope that they also will find this future inspiring, and that we all find a place in it that makes our life good and possible. So I'm at the end of my time here. So I hope today was worth your time. Here's another second sip for you. You know, this is probably the third one at this point, but cheers to you. I hope you have a great and better day.